Emily stood at the kitchen window watching Tom pack his things into a sports bag. He did it calmly, methodically, almost silently, as if he were going on a business trip, which he had mentioned dozens of times, rather than a weekend away. Dinner was cooling on the table, pasta with a sauce she had made according to his favorite recipe. No one had even touched it. "Are you sure you're going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "They're predicting rain." Tom shrugged. "A little fresh air won't hurt. I'm tired anyway." He said it with his usual tired smile, the one he used when he didn't want to continue the conversation. Emily knew that look. At first she thought it meant just tiredness, then irritation, but now it had become something else, a boundary. Between them, he threw his toothbrush, an old sweatshirt with a college logo, and his phone charger into his bag. "There probably won't be any cell service," he added as if apologizing. "The reception is bad where we're going." She nodded. "Of course. Hunting, right?" He replied with a short uh-huh, and looked away. When the door closed behind him, the house seemed to change. The silence wasn't empty. It was dense, palpable, almost physical. Emily caught herself listening to the refrigerator humming, the clock on the wall ticking away the seconds. Everything seemed louder than usual, even her own breathing. She walked into the living room and ran her finger along the armrest of the sofa. She remembered how, a couple of years ago, Tom had suggested, "Let's spend the weekend here without our phones. Just us." At the time, it had seemed romantic. Now it seemed ironic. Emily sat down in an armchair and took out her phone. His name was in her contact list, with a heart next to it. She opened her messages. The last one from him was 2 days ago. "Don't forget to buy cat food." No emoji. No kiss. She closed her eyes. Outside, it was raining softly and steadily. She thought that she used to love that sound, especially when he came home late and lay down quietly beside her. Now the rain sounded like a reminder of something that could never be brought back. Emily woke up earlier than usual, not because she had slept in, but because the house was too quiet. Usually on mornings like this, she would hear Tom slamming the closet door, the water running in the shower, him humming something under his breath as he got ready to go for a run. Now there was nothing. Even the cat, as if sensing his owner's mood, did not come to rub against her legs. She went into the kitchen. The cup he had drunk from yesterday was still on the table. The coffee had left a thin, almost perfect ring on the white porcelain. Emily reached out to take it away, but froze. For some reason, she wanted to leave it there, as a trace of his presence, or as proof that he had really been there. The phone was lying on the windowsill. The screen was blank. No messages, no calls. She pressed the button, just to see the light, and immediately turned it off. Usually on Saturdays they had breakfast together. Toast, eggs, a little argument about who should take out the trash. But today everything seemed out of place. The food had lost its taste. Even the smell of coffee was annoying. She opened the window and let in the morning air. From the street came the voices of neighbors, a dog barking, the sound of a passing car. The world was alive, moving as if nothing had happened. But inside her, something heavy seemed to be stuck, unspoken questions that she couldn't formulate. Emily sat down on the sofa and scrolled through social media. Pictures of other people's lives flashed by one after another. Breakfasts on the balcony, smiles, travels, couples in love. She felt strange. These were just ordinary pictures, but now they made her feel like she was standing on the other side of the glass. There was life, here was a pause. She remembered how a couple of months ago she had suggested to Tom, "Let's go somewhere together. Just get away." He had said, without looking up from his laptop, "Not now. Later. After the quarterly report." But later never came. Emily walked over to the mirror in the hallway. She looked at herself for a long time, as if trying to see something new, something forgotten, in her reflection. When was the last time I was happy, she thought. She couldn't remember exactly. Her phone was still out of service. She caught herself checking the screen every 10 minutes, as if that would change anything. She picked up a book, turned on some music, tried to read and listen, but her thoughts kept returning to him. Where was he now? With whom? Why did this feeling of anxiety feel so familiar, almost habitual? When the day passed noon, Emily felt tired, Not physically, but the kind of tiredness that comes when you wait too long. She closed her eyes and thought that maybe for the first time in a long time, she had a weekend just for herself. But she didn't know whether to be happy about it or afraid. Tom stood by the window of a cheap motel and watched the rain run down the cloudy glass, turning the light from the sign into red and yellow streaks. Behind the glass was a parking lot, 2 trucks, a 24 hours sign, and a few passers-by huddled in their coats. Everything looked gray, like a backdrop behind which one could hide. He didn't know what exactly he expected from this quiet weekend. Freedom? Oblivion? Or just the opportunity not to be himself? At first, it seemed like it would be easy. 2 days away from his usual life, where there were no responsibilities, no conversations about bills, and no "we need to talk." But now the ease had been replaced by emptiness. The woman on the bed stretched, pulling the sheet up higher. Her name was Laura. Or maybe Lauren. He wasn't sure because she introduced herself in the noise of the bar. And he didn't ask again. She was kind. Or at least she tried to seem kind. She spoke softly and laughed at his jokes, even though they weren't funny. There was something simple about her presence. No expectations, no usual questions like, "Where have you been?" Or "Why are you so quiet?" "You keep looking over there," she said, propping herself up slightly on her elbows. "It's like you want to leave." Tom turned, looked at her, but said nothing. He smiled, more out of habit than anything else. He didn't know how to explain that he wasn't looking at the parking lot, but somewhere further away. At the house where Emily was probably drinking coffee, checking her phone, waiting. And that this knowledge weighed heavier than any feeling of guilt. He ran his hand over his face, then mechanically picked up his phone from the table. The screen was dark. He always put it on silent, a habit, so that Emily wouldn't hear incoming notifications at an inopportune moment. Now he did the same thing, even though it no longer made sense. Laura got up, walked over to him, and hugged him from behind. Her hands were warm, her skin smelled of lavender cream. She said something quietly, but her words were drowned out by the sound of the rain. Tom felt a wave of fatigue wash over him. Not the kind you feel after a day at work, but another kind, internal, viscous, with no way out. He closed his eyes. A memory flashed inside him. Emily laughing, waving her arms, telling how they got lost on the highway on their way to the lake. She said then, "The main thing is not to know where you're going. Sometimes that's the point." Then he kissed her. Now he couldn't. He opened his eyes. The rain was still tapping on the glass. "Why am I here?" he thought. There was no answer. Only the feeling that he had taken a step from which there was no turning back. By Saturday evening, the house no longer seemed empty to her. It felt alien. Every sound was too loud. Every little thing in its place seemed suspiciously correct. As if someone had been diligently hiding the traces. Emily turned on the light in the living room, put the kettle on, and caught herself thinking that for the first time that day, she wanted to talk to someone. Not about anything in particular, just to hear a voice. She called his sister, pretending she wanted to know how her nephews were doing. "Hi, Jen," she said, trying to sound casual. Long time no see," she replied cheerfully. "How are you? Everything okay?" Emily hesitated for a second. "Everything's fine. Tom's gone hunting with his friends. I decided to take advantage of the quiet." There was a short laugh on the other end of the line. "Hunting? That's funny. He hates mosquitoes." "What?" Emily flinched. "Yeah, right. He almost ran away after the first bite last year." Jen laughed. "It's weird that he decided to go again." Emily replied with a short, "Yeah," and tried to smile, but something inside her tightened. The warmth coming from the kettle suddenly became unbearably hot. "Okay, Jen," she said quickly. "I'll call you later. Love you." When the call ended, silence hung in the air, a different kind of silence, thick with a sense of foreboding. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the phone as if it could explain something. Phrases flashed through her mind. Hunting, no signal. Funny he can't stand mosquitoes. It all came together in a picture that made her feel cold. Emily went into the bedroom. His shirt was lying on a chair, carelessly left there that morning. She picked it up and breathed in the familiar smell, woody, with a hint of gasoline and cheap deodorant. And suddenly she realized, This smell no longer evoked anything in her. No warmth, no longing. Only one question. Who else smelled like this now? The phone was flashing on the bedside table. No messages. Just a reminder. Call Tom's mom tomorrow. She pressed delete. Emily went out onto the porch. The sky was low, and it was raining as if someone were pouring it out of a bucket. She stood under the awning, feeling the cold drops fall on her hands. Her head was ringing with silence and thoughts. If it's true, she thought. Then what? But there was no answer. Only a strange relief that perhaps she already knew everything. And laughter, quiet, short, nervous, escaped her. Not because it was funny, but because it became clear. There was no turning back. He woke up to silence. The kind that doesn't calm you down, but scares you. At first, Tom didn't understand where he was. The room was flooded with pale morning light, gray and uncomfortable. The kind that only comes after a night of rain. The sheet was crumpled at his feet. A cigarette left in the ashtray was burning out by the window. The air smelled of cheap tobacco and something sweet and unfamiliar. He turned his head. Laura was asleep, turned away toward the wall. Her hair was tousled, her shoulder barely covered by the sheet. Everything looked calm, almost serene. But Tom felt a strange revulsion inside, not toward her, but toward himself. He sat down on the edge of the bed. His palms were cold. His jeans were on the floor, next to his phone. He turned on the screen. Not a single message. For some reason it stung. Although he himself wanted Emily not to write. He said there would be no contact. He wanted silence. He wanted to disappear for a couple of days. And now he was gone. Only now did he realize that no one seemed to care. He got up and walked over to the window. Outside, the sky was gray, the asphalt wet, and there were few cars on the road. The world was the same as ever, except that there was one less honest person in it. On the bedside table stood a glass of half-finished wine. He looked at it and suddenly remembered how Emily once said, "The worst thing is not betrayal. It's when you stop seeing me as a person." He dismissed it at the time. He said she was too sensitive, that everything was fine between them. But now those words sounded like a sentence. Tom ran his hand over his face and looked at himself in the cloudy mirror. A tired, gaunt face. A gaze that seemed foreign. There was no passion or guilt in it, only emptiness. He thought, it's still possible to stop everything. Go home, tell her everything, ask for forgiveness. Start over. But then another thought came. The one that always comes after. Why? This story has already happened. It already exists. It won't be erased, it won't disappear, even if he pretends that nothing happened. Laura stirred. Is it morning already? She asked sleepily. Almost, he replied. It's too early to get up. Lie down. His body felt heavy, his thoughts confused. He got dressed, took his jacket, and went out into the hallway. The street smelled of wet asphalt and fresh bread from the bakery across the road. Somewhere a sparrow was singing, too cheerfully for this morning. Tom lit a cigarette. The smoke stung his eyes. He suddenly realized that he felt no taste, no smell, not even guilt. Only a quiet, lingering awareness that everything inside was over. The house greeted him with silence. Not the cozy, homely kind, but the kind that made him feel something was missing. Tom took off his shoes in the hallway, hung up his jacket, and mechanically placed his bag against the wall. Everything looked as if he had only been gone for a couple of hours. A neatly folded blanket on the sofa, a cup on the windowsill, his book on the table. But the air was different, fresh, too clean. As if someone had recently opened all the windows and aired out not only the rooms, but also the memories. He stepped into the kitchen. There was an empty kettle on the stove and a note on the table. Folded in half, neatly, without tearing. Emily's handwriting. He knew that handwriting down to the smallest detail. How she slightly slanted the letters to the right, how she wrote T, without a crossbar. He sat down and opened the note. Just one line. Your quiet weekends are now mine too. Nothing else. No accusations, no questions. Not even a name. He read it several times. Then he folded it back up. And he realized that this silence said more than he could ever explain. He got up and walked around the house. The room looked almost the same as before, except that her book was gone from the nightstand. The bottle of shampoo had disappeared from the bathroom, and her blue raincoat was gone from the coat rack. Nothing superfluous, nothing dramatic. Just absence. He sat down on the edge of the bed. Suddenly, it became difficult to breathe. Not because he felt sorry for her. Not because he was afraid. But because this was the end that didn't look like the end. Just the moment when everything became irreversible. Tom looked out the window. It was slowly getting lighter outside. The bird, the same one that had been singing at the motel, it seemed, was chirping again somewhere in a tree. Too loud for a Monday. He remembered how he once said to Emily, "Don't you think we're just tired?" She replied, "No. We just stopped listening to each other." Now he realized she was right. He listened to everything, except her. The clock ticked in the kitchen. He sat motionless, clutching the note in his hand. The paper was warm from his fingers. All that remained was silence, the smell of minty detergent, and a faint trace of her perfume in the air. And that line, which now sounded louder than any reproach. "Your quiet weekends are now mine too."